Dr. Alina Vasquez had always believed the ocean held secrets, but she never imagined she would discover one that would change her entire understanding of life itself. At 32, she had dedicated her career to studying the mysterious creatures that lived in the deepest parts of the Pacific Ocean. Her specialty was bioluminescence, the way sea creatures create their own light to communicate in the darkness below. The marine research station where Alina worked sat on a cliff overlooking the endless blue waters. Every morning she would suit up in her diving gear and descend into the underwater world that had captivated her since childhood. Today felt different, though. The ocean seemed calmer than usual, almost as if it was waiting for something to happen. Alina had been tracking unusual light patterns for weeks. Her underwater cameras had captured strange flashes of color that didn't match any known species. The patterns were too organized, too deliberate to be random. It looked almost like a language, but that seemed impossible. No sea creature had ever shown such complex communication abilities. As she descended to her usual research depth of 60 feet, Alina noticed the water around her beginning to shimmer with soft, pulsing lights. Blue, green, and silver sparkles danced through the water like underwater stars. She had seen bioluminescence before, but nothing quite like this. The lights seemed to be moving toward her. It's getting brighter and more organized with each passing moment. Then she saw her. The creature that emerged from the deeper waters was unlike anything Alina had ever encountered. She was about the size of a dolphin, but her body was more graceful, almost serpentine. Her skin seemed to shift between colors, deep ocean blue one moment, silvery green the next. What caught Alina's attention most were her eyes. They were large, intelligent, and seemed to be studying Alina with the same curiosity that Alina felt. Alina floated perfectly still, not wanting to frighten the magnificent creature. But instead of swimming away, the being began to circle her, slowly. With each circle, the lights along her body pulsed in different patterns. Alina realized she was trying to communicate. The creature stopped directly in front of Alina and tilted her head, much like a curious dog might do. Alina could hardly believe what she was seeing. This wasn't just animal behavior. This was intelligence. This was consciousness. Alina slowly raised her hand and waved. The creature watched intently, then mimicked the movement with one of her graceful fins. Alina's heart raced with excitement. She was making contact with an unknown species, and this species was clearly trying to communicate back. For the next hour, Alina and the mysterious creature engaged in what could only be described as a conversation. When Alina moved her arms in a swimming motion, the creature copied her. When Alina pointed to herself, the creature pointed back. When Alina touched her diving mask, the creature gently touched Alina's hand with her fin. The creature seemed particularly fascinated by Alina's breathing apparatus. She circled around Alina several times, her lights pulsing in what Alina began to recognize as excitement or curiosity. Alina realized the creature was trying to understand how she could breathe underwater. Alina decided to try something bold. She pulled out her waterproof tablet that she used for taking notes and began drawing simple shapes: a circle, a square, a triangle. The creature watched intently, her large eyes following every stroke. When Alina finished, the creature did something that made Alina's breath catch in her throat. The creature began creating her own shapes, using the bioluminescent patterns on her body. First, she recreated Alina's circle, then the square, then the triangle. But she didn't stop there. She began creating more complex patterns, spirals, waves, geometric designs that were beautiful and intricate. Alina knew she had to document this incredible encounter. She activated her underwater camera and began recording. The creature seemed to understand what the camera was and actually appeared to pose for it, displaying her most brilliant light patterns. As Alina's air supply began to run low, she knew she had to surface. She pointed upward and then to herself, trying to communicate that she needed to leave. The creature seemed to understand and began swimming upward alongside her. When Alina reached the surface, she expected the creature to disappear back into the depths. Instead, she remained nearby, her head above water, watching Alina with those remarkable eyes. Alina treaded water for a moment, still hardly believing what had happened. She had discovered not just a new species, but an intelligent one. A species that could communicate, learn, and possibly even think in ways similar to humans. As Alina swam back to the research station's platform, the creature followed at a distance. When Alina climbed out of the water, the creature remained. At the surface, watching, Alina waved goodbye, and the creature responded with a gentle splash before disappearing beneath the waves. That night, Alina could barely sleep. She reviewed the footage over and over, each viewing revealing new details about the creature's behavior and communication attempts. She had always dreamed of making a discovery that would change marine biology forever, but she had never imagined it would be anything like this. The next morning, Alina was already suiting up for another dive before sunrise. She had to see the creature again. She had to know if their encounter had been real or just a once-in-a-lifetime moment. As she descended into the now familiar waters, her heart pounded with anticipation. The creature was waiting for her. This time, she wasn't alone. Two other similar beings swam nearby, but they kept their distance. Alina realized that the creature from yesterday had told others about their meeting. The thought that these beings had a social structure and could share information made Alina's scientific mind race with possibilities. The creature Alina had met the day before approached her immediately, her body lighting up with what Alina now recognized as a greeting. Alina waved back, and the creature responded with an even brighter display of colors. Alina knew her life had just taken a turn she could never have anticipated. She had found something extraordinary in the depths of the ocean, and she had the feeling that this was just the beginning of an incredible journey. 3 weeks had passed since Alina's first encounter with the mysterious sea creature, and their daily meetings had become the highlight of her research work. Alina had decided to call her new friend Lyra, inspired by the constellation-like patterns of light that danced across her skin. Every morning, Alina would dive down to their meeting spot and Lyra would be there waiting. It's almost as if she'd been counting the hours. Alina had moved her research base to an underwater habitat that allowed her to spend longer periods. Beneath the surface, a transparent dome structure sat 30 feet below the waves, giving her a perfect view of the ocean around her. It was like having an office in the middle of an aquarium, and Lyra seemed fascinated by this human-made bubble of air in her watery world. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Alina was struggling to explain the concept of writing to Lyra. She had been showing her waterproof tablet to Lyra for days, drawing simple pictures and symbols, but something wasn't quite connecting. Lyra would copy the shapes with her light patterns, but Alina could tell she didn't understand what they meant. Then Alina had an idea. Instead of drawing random shapes, she began drawing a picture of Lyra herself. She sketched the graceful curves of her body, the large intelligent eyes, and even tried to represent the light patterns with different colored styluses. As she drew, Lyra moved closer to the habitat's viewing window, her lights pulsing with what Alina now recognized as excitement. When Alina finished the drawing and held it up, Lyra's entire body erupted in the most brilliant display of bioluminescence Alina had ever seen. The creature spun in the water, her lights creating spirals and waves of color that took Alina's breath away. Then something amazing happened. Lyra began creating light patterns that looked exactly like the drawing Alina had just made. Alina realized that Lyra understood that the marks on the tablet represented her. She understood the concept of symbols standing for real things. This was the moment Alina knew she was dealing with intelligence that rivaled her own. From that day forward, their communication system developed rapidly. Alina would draw pictures of objects, and Lyra would create corresponding light patterns. Soon, they had established symbols for water, food, swimming, happy, sad, and dozens of other concepts. Alina created a special waterproof notebook where she recorded all their shared symbols, creating the first dictionary of human ocean creature communication. But Lyra wasn't just learning from Alina, she was teaching too. One day Lyra began showing Alina light patterns that Alina had never seen before. These patterns were more complex, more beautiful, and seemed to tell stories. Alina watched in wonder as Lyra's body became a canvas for moving art, displaying scenes that looked like underwater landscapes. Other creatures, and what Alina could only describe as memories, Alina began to understand that Lyra's species didn't just communicate with light patterns. They shared experiences, emotions, and even thoughts through their bioluminescence. It was like having a language that could paint pictures and tell stories at the same time. As their communication improved, Lyra became increasingly curious about Elena's world above the water. Elena would surface and bring back objects to show her: a flower, a photograph, a piece of fruit. Lyra would examine each item carefully, her lights pulsing with questions that Elena was getting better at interpreting one day. Elena brought down a photograph of her family. It showed Elena with her parents and younger brother at a beach vacation from years ago. Elena pointed to herself in the photo, then to the other people, trying to explain the concept of family. Lyra studied the photograph for a long time, her lights dimming to a soft, contemplative glow. Then Lyra did something that made Elena's heart skip. She began creating light patterns that seemed to represent multiple creatures swimming together. Elena realized that Lyra was trying to explain her own family structure. The patterns showed creatures caring for each other, playing together, and sharing food. Elena understood that Lyra had a family too. Somewhere in the vast ocean, Elena became curious about how Lyra's species formed families and relationships. Through their growing symbol system, Elena began asking questions about Lyra's life, her community, and how her kind lived together. Lyra seemed eager to share, and Elena learned that her species formed deep bonds that went beyond simple companionship. One afternoon, Elena was trying to explain human relationships to Lyra. She drew pictures of couples, families with children, and tried to show how humans chose partners and created families together. Lyra watched with intense interest. Her lights pulsing with what Elena had learned meant deep thinking. Elena found herself explaining concepts she had never had to put into simple terms before. How humans fell in love, how they chose to spend their lives together, how they decided to have children and raise them as a family. She drew pictures of weddings of parents with babies, of children growing up. Lyra's response surprised Elena. Instead of just copying the symbols, Lyra began creating entirely new light patterns. These patterns were more complex than anything Elena had seen before, filled with swirling colors and shapes that seemed to represent deep emotions and connections. Elena realized that Lyra was trying to explain her own species' approach to relationships and family. The patterns seemed to show that Lyra's kind formed partnerships based on something deeper than Elena had ever imagined. It wasn't just about choosing someone to be with, but about sharing consciousness, memories, and even dreams. As Elena watched Lyra's light display, she began to understand that her new friend's species had a completely different way of thinking about love, partnership, and creating new life. Their bonds weren't just emotional or physical, but involved a sharing of minds and spirits that humans had never achieved. Elena found herself wondering what it would be like to connect with another being so completely. She had always believed that human relationships were the deepest form of connection possible, but Lyra was showing her that there were other ways to bond, other ways to share life with another consciousness. The more Elena learned about Lyra's world, the more questions she had, and the more questions she asked, the more she realized that this friendship was changing not just her understanding of marine biology, but her understanding of what it meant to connect with another living being. That night, as Elena reviewed her notes in the underwater habitat, she could see Lyra swimming nearby, her soft glow visible in the darkness. Elena pressed her hand against the habitat's window, and Lyra swam close. Touching the glass with her fin in what had become their goodnight ritual, Elena knew that tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new questions, and new wonders. She was learning a new language, discovering a new form of consciousness, and forming a friendship unlike anything she had ever experienced. But she also had this strange feeling that this was leading somewhere bigger, somewhere that would challenge everything she thought she knew about life, love, and connection. 2 months had passed since Elena first met Lyra, and their friendship had grown into something deeper than either of them had expected. Elena found herself sharing thoughts and feelings with Lyra that she had never shared with another human being. There was something about the way Lyra listened, the way her lights responded to Elena's emotions, that made Elena feel truly understood for the first time in her life. Elena had always been dedicated to her work, sometimes to the point where personal relationships took a back seat. Her colleagues often joked that she was married to the ocean, and Elena had never argued with them. She had dated over the years, but no relationship had ever felt as natural or as deep as the connection she was forming with this remarkable creature from the depths. One day, as Elena was explaining human customs to Lyra, she found herself talking about loneliness. She drew pictures of people sitting alone, eating meals by themselves, going to movies without companions. Lyra's lights dimmed to a soft, sympathetic glow as she watched Elena's drawings. Then Elena surprised herself by admitting something she had never said out loud before. She told Lyra about her own loneliness, how she had chosen her career over relationships, how she sometimes wondered if she would ever find someone who truly understood her passion for the ocean and her dedication to her research. Lyra responded with a light pattern that Elena had never seen before. It was gentle, warm, and somehow comforting. Elena realized that Lyra was trying to show her that she understood, that she too had experienced loneliness before they met. Elena began sharing more personal details about her life. She told Lyra about her childhood dreams of becoming a marine biologist, about the first time she saw the ocean and knew it was where she belonged. She talked about her fears, her hopes, and her dreams for the future. Lyra listened to everything, responding with light patterns that conveyed understanding, support, and something that Elena could only describe as caring. In return, Lyra began sharing more about her own life. Through their established communication system, Elena learned that Lyra's species lived in small communities deep in the ocean trenches. They were long-lived, some surviving for hundreds of years, and they formed bonds that lasted lifetimes. But Lyra had been different from her kind. She had always been curious about the surface world, about the creatures that lived above the waves. Elena discovered that Lyra had been watching human activities for years, before she finally decided to make contact. She had observed ships passing overhead, seen divers exploring the shallower waters, and had always wondered what it would be like to communicate with these strange surface dwellers. Their conversations. Elena would ask Lyra about her species' understanding of life, death, and existence. Lyra would share concepts that were completely foreign to human thinking, but somehow it made perfect sense in the context of their underwater world. One afternoon, Elena was explaining human concepts of love and partnership to Lyra. She drew pictures of couples holding hands, of wedding ceremonies, of families with children. She tried to explain how humans chose their partners, how they decided to spend their lives together, and how they created families. Lyra's response was more complex than usual. Her light patterns seemed to show a deeper understanding of connection than Elena had ever encountered. Through their symbols, Lyra began explaining how her species approached relationships and the creation of new life. Elena learned that Lyra's kind didn't just choose partners based on attraction or compatibility. They formed bonds that involved sharing consciousness, memories, and even dreams. When they decided to create new life together, it wasn't just a physical process, but a spiritual and intellectual one as well. Elena found herself fascinated by this concept. She had always believed that human love was the deepest form of connection possible, but Lyra was showing her that there were other ways to bond with another being. The idea of sharing consciousness, of truly knowing another being's thoughts and feelings, was something Elena had never imagined possible. As Elena listened to Lyra's explanations, she began to realize that her own feelings were changing. What had started as scientific curiosity had grown into genuine friendship, and now she was experiencing something she couldn't quite name. She cared about Lyra in a way that went beyond research or even friendship. She looked forward to their meetings not just for the scientific discoveries, but for the joy of spending time with someone who truly understood her. Elena began to question her own assumptions about relationships and connection. She had always thought that meaningful bonds could only exist between members of the same species, but Lyra was challenging that belief. Their friendship had brought Alina more happiness and understanding than many of her human relationships had. One evening, as Alina was preparing to leave the underwater habitat, Lyra approached the viewing window and created a light pattern that Alina had never seen before. It was beautiful, complex, and filled with what Alina could only describe as affection. Alina realized that Lyra was trying to tell her something important. Through their communication system, Alina understood that Lyra was expressing gratitude for their friendship. But there was something more in the pattern, something that suggested Lyra's feelings had grown beyond simple friendship as well. Alina found herself wondering if it was possible for two such different beings to form a bond that transcended the boundaries of species. She had always believed that true connection required similar backgrounds, similar experiences, and similar ways of thinking. But Lyra was proving that understanding could exist between beings who were completely different. That night, Alina couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Lyra's light patterns, about the depth of understanding they had achieved, and about the feelings that were growing stronger each day. She had never experienced anything like this before, and she wasn't sure what to make of it. Alina began to realize that she was falling in love. Not in the traditional human sense, but in a way that was entirely new to her. She was falling in love with Lyra's intelligence, her curiosity, her gentle nature, and the way she made Alina feel understood and accepted for who she truly was. The next morning, Alina descended to their meeting spot with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had decided to be honest with Lyra about her feelings, even though she wasn't sure how to explain them or if Lyra would understand. When Lyra appeared, her lights immediately began pulsing with what Alina recognized as happiness. But there was something different about her today, something that suggested she too had been thinking about their relationship and what it meant. Alina began. Yeah. Well, I'm sign Kai saw I'm sign I'm shy Saran West why I'm Kasai She drew pictures of hearts, of two beings, spending time together, of the happiness she felt when they were together. Lyra watched intently, her lights growing brighter with each symbol. Then Lyra began responding with her own light patterns. Alina watched in amazement as Lyra created displays that seemed to mirror her own feelings. The patterns showed connection, understanding, and what Alina could only interpret as love. Alina realized that they were both experiencing something unprecedented. Two beings from completely different worlds, with completely different ways of existing, had found a connection that transcended all the barriers between them. As Alina watched Lyra's beautiful light display, she began to understand that love and connection weren't limited to traditional boundaries. They could exist between any two beings who truly understood and cared for each other. Regardless of their differences, Alina knew that their relationship was about to enter uncharted territory. She had no idea what the future would hold, but she was ready to explore it with Lyra by her side. Whatever came next, she knew that this connection had already changed her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. The morning sun filtered through the ocean waves as Alina made her way to the underwater habitat that had become her second home. 3 months had passed since she first met Lyra, and their relationship had grown into something beautiful and complex. Alina had learned to read Lyra's moods through her light patterns. And Lyra seemed to understand Alina's emotions even before Alina herself realized what she was feeling. Today felt different, though. Alina had noticed that Lyra seemed more thoughtful lately, her light patterns more contemplative and deep. During their conversations, Lyra would sometimes pause for long moments, her lights dimming to a soft glow as if she was considering something important. Alina had been wondering what was on Lyra's mind. In the past few weeks, their conversations had become more philosophical. It discussed the nature of existence, the meaning of connection, and the different ways that beings could leave their mark on the world. Alina had shared her human understanding of legacy and purpose. Lyra had explained her species' beliefs about creating something meaningful that would outlast their individual lives. As Alina settled into the habitat's observation area, she saw Lyra approaching through the clear blue water. But today, Lyra wasn't alone. She was accompanied by two other members of her species, creatures Alina had seen before but never interacted with directly. Alina's heart skipped a beat as she wondered if something was wrong. But as Lyra drew closer, Alina could see that her light patterns were calm and purposeful. The other creatures remained at a respectful distance, almost as if they were witnesses to something important. Alina pressed her hand against the viewing window. Lyra responded by touching the glass with her fin in their familiar greeting. Then Lyra began creating light patterns that Alina had never seen before. These weren't the usual symbols they had developed for communication. These patterns were more complex, more beautiful, and seemed to tell a story that Alina couldn't quite understand at first. Alina watched in fascination as Lyra's entire body became a canvas for moving art. The patterns showed two different creatures swimming together, learning from each other and creating something beautiful between them. Alina realized that Lyra was telling the story of their friendship. But there was something more in the patterns, something that suggested this was leading to an important question. As the light display continued, Alina began to understand what Lyra was showing her. The patterns depicted the two creatures not just learning from each other, but creating something new together, something that combined the best of both their worlds and would serve as a bridge between their different forms of existence. Alina felt her pulse quicken as she realized that Lyra was proposing something extraordinary. Through their established communication system, Lyra began explaining her idea more clearly. She wanted them to create something together that would represent their unique bond and serve as a way for their two species to understand each other better. Alina listened with growing excitement as Lyra outlined her vision. She wanted to create a living underwater garden, a place where bioluminescent creatures could thrive and create patterns that would tell the story of their friendship. This garden would be more than just a collection of sea life. It would be a living artwork, a communication center, and a symbol of what was possible when two different forms of consciousness worked together. Alina was amazed by the beauty, and complexity of Lyra's proposal. This wasn't just about creating something pretty to look at. Lyra was suggesting they build a bridge between their worlds, a place where humans and her species could meet, communicate, and learn from each other. But as Alina listened to Lyra's explanation, she began to understand that there was something even deeper in this proposal. Lyra wasn't just suggesting they create a garden together. She was asking Alina to join her in a form of creation that was similar to how her species brought new life into the world. Alina's mind raced as she tried to process what this meant. Lyra's species didn't just reproduce biologically. They created new life through shared consciousness, combined creativity, and deep emotional connection. By asking Alina to create this garden with her, Lyra was essentially asking her to participate in her species' form of reproduction and creation. Alina felt a mixture of excitement, confusion, and wonder. She had never imagined that two such different beings could create something together in such a meaningful way. But as she looked at Lyra's hopeful light patterns, she realized that this was exactly what their friendship had been building toward. Alina began to understand that Lyra wasn't just proposing a scientific project. She was asking Alina to be her partner in creating something that would be like their child, a living representation of their bond that would continue to grow and evolve long after they were gone. The thought was overwhelming and beautiful at the same time. Alina had always wondered what it would be like to create new life with someone she loved. But she had never imagined it could happen in such an extraordinary way. This wouldn't be biological reproduction, but it would be creation in its purest form, born from love, understanding, shared purpose. Alina looked at the other creatures who had come with Lyra and realized they were there as witnesses to this proposal. In Lyra's culture, the decision to create something together was clearly a significant moment that required community, acknowledgement. Elena's heart was pounding as she considered Lyra's proposal. She had spent her entire career studying marine life, but she had never imagined participating in the creation of new life in such a direct way. This garden would be more than just a research project. It would be a living testament to their relationship and a bridge. Between their two worlds, Elena began to see the possibilities that such a creation could offer. It could revolutionize marine biology, create new opportunities for interspecies communication, and serve as a model for how different forms of consciousness could work together. But more importantly, it would be theirs, something they had brought into existence together through their combined knowledge, creativity, and love. As Elena watched Lyra's patient, hopeful light patterns, she realized that this was the most important decision she had ever been asked to make. It wasn't just about agreeing to a scientific project. It was about committing to a form of partnership and creation that would change both their lives forever. Elena thought about her human understanding of relationships and reproduction. She had always believed that creating new life was the ultimate expression of love between two beings. But Lyra was showing her that there were other ways to create, other ways to bring something new and meaningful into the world. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes as she realized how much this moment meant to both of them. Lyra wasn't just asking her to help with a project. She was asking Elena to be her partner in the deepest sense, to join her in creating something that would be a living symbol of their extraordinary bond. Elena pressed both hands against the viewing window and looked directly into Lyra's large, intelligent eyes. Through their communication system, she began to signal her response. She told Lyra that she was honored by the proposal, that she understood the significance of what was being asked, and that she wanted to learn more about how they could make this incredible vision a reality. Lyra's response was the most brilliant display of bioluminescence Elena had ever seen. Her entire body erupted in waves of color and light that seemed to express pure joy and excitement. The other creatures began creating their own light patterns. What Elena realized was a form of celebration and approval. Elena knew that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. She was about to embark on a journey of creation that would challenge everything she thought she knew about life, love, and what it meant to bring something new into the world. As she watched Lyra's celebration display, Elena felt a deep sense of purpose and excitement. She was about to participate in something that had never been done before, something that would require all her knowledge, creativity, and love. But she was ready for the challenge, ready to explore this new form of partnership and creation with the most extraordinary being she had ever met. 6 months had passed since Elena and Lyra began their incredible project together, and the underwater garden they were creating had grown beyond anything Elena had ever imagined possible. What started as a simple idea had blossomed into something truly magical, a living masterpiece that combined Elena's scientific knowledge with Lyra's deep understanding of ocean life. The garden was located in a secluded underwater valley that Lyra had discovered years ago. The area was naturally protected from strong currents and had the perfect depth to allow sunlight to filter through while maintaining the mystery of the deeper waters. Elena had never seen anything like it, even in all her years of marine research. Elena and Lyra had spent weeks planning every detail of their creation. Elena contributed her knowledge of marine ecosystems, water chemistry, and sustainable growth patterns. Lyra brought her species, ancient understanding of bioluminescent communication, and the delicate balance needed to create harmony between different forms of sea life. Together, they had designed a living reef that was unlike anything that existed in nature. The coral formations grew in spiral patterns that seemed to dance in the ocean currents. Bioluminescent algae created pathways of light that pulsed gently through the garden like a heartbeat. Schools of fish swam through carefully planned routes that allowed them to create moving patterns of color and light. Elena watched in amazement as their creation came to life. Each day brought new surprises as different creatures discovered the garden and made it their home. Jellyfish drifted through the upper levels like floating lanterns, their gentle glow adding to the garden's ethereal beauty. Colorful sea anemones swayed in the currents, their movements synchronized as if they were part of a grand underwater ballet. But the most amazing part of the garden was its ability to communicate. Lyra had taught certain species to create light, patterns that could convey simple messages. When humans approached the garden, the creatures would create welcoming displays of color and movement. When members of Lyra's species visited, the patterns would shift to their more complex communication style. Alina had brought other scientists to see the garden, and their reactions had been everything she had hoped for. Dr. Rodriguez, her longtime mentor, had stood speechless as he watched the creatures respond to his presence with gentle waves of bioluminescence. Dr. Chen, a marine biologist from Japan, had actually cried when she saw how the different species worked together to create patterns that seemed to tell stories. But the garden wasn't just impressing scientists. Word had spread through Lyra's community as well, and members of her species had begun visiting regularly. Alina watched with joy as Lyra proudly showed her relatives and friends what they had created together. The light displays during these visits were spectacular, with multiple creatures creating synchronized patterns that filled the entire garden with color and movement. Alina realized that they had achieved something that neither species had thought possible. They had created a place where humans and Lyra's kind could meet, communicate, and share their knowledge. The garden had become a bridge between two worlds, exactly as Lyra had envisioned. Alina found herself spending more and more time in the garden, not just as a scientist, but as someone who felt deeply connected to this living creation. She would swim through the coral formations, watching the fish respond to her presence with gentle flashes of light. She would sit quietly in the sandy areas, observing how the different species interacted and communicated with each other. The garden had taught Alina so much about cooperation and communication. She watched as tiny cleaner fish worked alongside massive groupers, each playing their part in maintaining the health of the ecosystem. She saw how different species shared resources and protected each other, creating a community that was stronger than any individual could be alone. One evening, as Alina was preparing to leave the garden after a long day of observation, Lyra approached her with a light pattern that Alina immediately recognized as excitement. Alina had learned to read Lyra's moods so well that she could almost predict what her friend was feeling before she expressed it. Lyra began creating a complex display that showed Alina something wonderful. The garden was growing beyond what they had originally planned. New species were arriving on their own, drawn by the unique environment they had created. Young fish were being born in the protected areas of the reef, and new coral formations were beginning to grow naturally. Alina realized that their creation had become truly alive, capable of growing and evolving on its own. What they had built together was no longer dependent on their constant care and attention. It had become a self-sustaining ecosystem that would continue to thrive and develop long after they were gone. Alina felt a deep sense of pride, an accomplishment as she understood what this meant. She and Lyra had created something that would outlast both of them, something that would continue to serve as a bridge between their species for generations to come. In a way, it was like they had brought a new form of life into the world, one that combined the best of both their kinds. As Alina watched the garden's evening display, with hundreds of creatures creating synchronized patterns of light that painted the water in brilliant colors, she thought about how much her life had changed since meeting Lyra. She had always been passionate about marine biology, but this experience had shown her that science could be about more than just studying and documenting. It could be about creating, collaborating, and building bridges between different forms of life. Alina also thought about her understanding of relationships and what it meant to create something with another being. She had learned that love and partnership could take many forms, that two beings could come together to create something beautiful regardless of their differences. The garden was proof that cooperation and understanding could overcome any barrier. The project had also changed how other scientists viewed interspecies communication. Alina had published papers about the garden that had revolutionized marine biology. Universities around the world were now studying their methods, and several research teams were attempting to create similar communication projects with other intelligent marine species. But perhaps most importantly, the garden had shown both humans and Lyra's species that they were not alone in the universe. There were other forms of consciousness, other ways of thinking and being, and these differences could be celebrated rather than feared. Alina looked at Lyra, who was creating gentle patterns of contentment as she watched their creation thrive. Alina realized that what they had accomplished together was the ultimate expression of love and partnership. They had taken their different abilities, knowledge, and perspectives, and combined them to create something that neither could have achieved. Alone, as the sun set above the ocean's surface, casting dancing shadows through the water, Alina and Lyra's garden continued its gentle display of light and movement. Fish swam through the coral formations in perfect harmony, their movements creating living art that told the story of two different species learning to understand and create together. Alina knew that she would continue working with Lyra for years to come, expanding their garden and discovering new ways for their species to communicate and collaborate. But she also knew that what they had already accomplished would stand as a testament to the power of friendship, understanding, and shared creation. The garden had become more than just a scientific achievement. It was a living symbol of hope, showing that beings from different worlds could come together to create something beautiful and meaningful. Alina and Lyra had proven that love, creativity, and cooperation could transcend any boundary, creating new forms of life and understanding that would inspire others for generations to come. As Alina prepared to surface for the night, she touched the glass of her habitat one last time, and Lyra responded with their familiar good-night greeting. Alina smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new discoveries and new opportunities to expand their incredible creation together.